Hi, there are some things that apply for both MLA and APA, so I'm putting together this video first and then you'll watch an individual video that just covers what you need to know for each kind of citation depending on which citation format you're using in your paper. So first of all, let's go over some of the resources that you have. There are two major resources, Appendix 2 in the textbook and the Al Purdue website, which has specific guidelines for both MLA and APA. If you'll remember from your textbook, they had specific guidelines for summarizing, paraphrasing, and using a direct quote in your paper. And basically, a summary, remember that you want to make that summary brief and to the point, paraphrase as you're putting what somebody else has said into your own words. You have to be careful not to patch right. And direct quote, names and punctuation are really important. But for all of these, remember that you still need to cite the source. It doesn't matter if you're doing a summary, paraphrase, or direct quote, you still need to let your audience know where you got the information. As a quick review as well, remember that part of including a good summary and paraphrase is incorporating what they say and what you say. So at the very beginning, you want to introduce your claim, the main idea. You want to make sure that you introduce your source, and that's what's here in blue on both of these. And then, if you're doing a summary, you can kind of summarize that in your own words. If you're doing a paraphrase or a direct quote, you want to make sure that you include that. And then afterwards, be sure to include what you say. Sum it up, in short, in other words. Make sure that your audience understands how you're interpreting the quote. And that's really important because that's how you avoid making your quote feel like an orphan. Remember that you want to make that quote really fit into your paper smoothly. So you really need to introduce it, integrate it, and interpret it. The one thing you want to make sure though is that you don't kidnap the quote. And kidnapping happens when you do patch writing. Basically what happens there is you introduce the quote and you say where you got it, but you use direct phrases and you copy the direct wording straight from the source without putting quotation marks around it. So you see this part in red here is where they've put that in, but because there's no quotation marks around it, we assume that this is the author's words, and it's really not. It's the original source words. So you can fix this either by putting quotation marks around these phrases, or you just need to restate it in your own words and make sure that it's your own language. Another thing to really remember is punctuation. When you are introducing a quote, make sure that you have a period, sorry, not a period, a comma right before you introduce the quote itself. If it's an entire complete sentence, capitalize the first letter in the quote, and make sure instead of putting the period here, you want to put the period after the page number that you include, if there is a page number. If there's not a page number, then you're going to put this period on the inside of those quotation marks. Just to show you another example, here again in your book on page 288, it gives a couple of things. Here there's not a specific page number associated, so you notice it's just the period and there's the quotation marks here. Here, even though it's not highlighted in blue, the council is clearly referring to this same source. And then they have, again, these parts in quotation marks because they're direct words or phrasing from the original source. And then the page number here with the period after. Now, it's not always necessary to introduce the attributive tag first. It is possible to do it at the end. So you can put the entire thing in parentheses after you state something to show that that's where the information came from. But it really is more preferred to go ahead and state that up front, because that way, especially if your source has a lot of ethos, then you'll want to state it up front. So that's just some reminders for quoting. The other thing is just to remember in your works cited and references page, remember that if you're using MLA, it's called works cited. If you're using APA, it's the references page. There's a whole section in your book on these pages that talks about this, but it is a separate page. That doesn't mean that you turn in a separate page, but it's just on a different it just means that you don't put the works cited right after your last paragraph. You're gonna press enter or just make sure that it's on its own page within your whole paper. So everything will be in one document, your paper and the works cited, but you just want to make sure that your works cited is on a different page. Also, you want to make sure your sources are in alphabetical order and that you have hanging indents. Now, if you want to see what this looks like even more, make sure that you watch one of the videos, MLA or APA, to get extra info on how to cite different kinds of sources in your paper correctly and completely.